Hi and welcome back. By the end of this course, you'll become proficient in writing bash shell scripts for the automation of your daily jobs. Now, let's start to take a closer look at what bash shell is, as well as what the difference is between the shell and the shell scripts. A shell is a program that takes commands from the user through the keyboard or from a file and gives them to the operating system's kernel to get executed. It's also called the command interpreter because it accepts commands from the user and then checks or interprets them to see if they are syntactically correct. And if they are, the shell will send them to the kernel for execution. Think of a shell as an interface between the user and the kernel. The shell gets started when the user logs in and starts the terminal. To see what shell has started, run the following in the terminal. Echo $0 or echo $shell in capitals. You'll probably see that bash is the name of your shell because this is the most used one on Linux. But you should know that there are also other shells available, like the original Bourne shell, Dash, C shell, Z shell, and more. Note that bash is the default shell on most Linux distributions, including Ubuntu, Mint, Emacs, Debian, Red Hat, Fedora, or Kali. By the way, the name bash is an acronym for the Bourne Again shell, where Bourne is the original Unix shell developed at AT&T by Stephen Bourne. You can get a list of all valid login shells by displaying the contents of etc shells. And if you want to change the user's default shell to another one, run ch sh -s and the path to the new shell. Note that each user can have another default shell, and you can see the default shell of a user in /etc password here on the last column. For example, the user called student has the bash as its default shell. All the other users are system users and don't have a valid shell. This is what no login means. Now that you've understood what a shell is, let's move on and see what a shell script is and why we need them. A shell script is basically an executable text file that contains shell commands and other specific programming structures and components like variables, parameters, functions, loops, and so on that are executed sequentially. That's all. Shell scripting is a very powerful Linux administration tool. Whenever you find yourself doing the same task over and over again, you should actually use shell scripting instead. This is known as repetitive task automation. By using shell scripting, you can create your own power tools, customize administrative tasks, or create simple applications. And since the scripts you develop are well tested, the chances of errors occurring are highly reduced. Another advantage of using shell scripts is that the user who runs them doesn't have to know all the details of Linux and programming. Just imagine that you develop a shell script that makes a backup of an SQL database, and the junior sysadmin will just run the script without knowing all the details about how to connect and authenticate to the SQL server, what SQL commands to execute, in what order, and so on. He simply runs the script as any other Linux command and the backup is done. Let me give you a few practical examples of some common administrative tasks where you'll find shell scripts to be of a great help. Monitoring the system, data backup and restoring, creating an email-based alert system when something happens, user administration, security auditing, and many more. Alright, in this video, we've covered what a shell is, what the default one is, and how to change it. You've also learned the difference between the shell and the scripts, and what is the purpose of shell scripts. In the next video, we'll go hands-on and create our first script. See you in a moment.